What's going on astrologically on the 23rd of September 2015? I'm Stephen Good, an astrologer living in Spain, and I'm going to be telling you about what I find is most important in this chart, which is definitely very interesting because it contains quite a lot of not very common ingredients, and that's what I'm going to be telling you about. Meanwhile, I'm going to be showing you lists of entries on YouTube and Google in English and Spanish about this, we could say, famous moment in time, which has had a lot said about, just especially for those who haven't looked into it yet, to realize how much thought and attention this has actually brought to many people. Okay, so I think it's definitely a moment which is worth talking about because it is an equinox, it is the beginning of Libra. It's a moment which I consider has quite a lot of positive potential, but it's also unstable. Emotionally, it's not necessarily the most, you could say, happy, flowing, outgoing mood. There's certain references to false prophets and illusion, but also interesting advancements. It always depends with astrology what we make of it, since the planets don't affect us or influence or dominate or manipulate us. They are symbols of our own selves. They are parts of us. That's it. So destiny is open to how we co-create it along the way. Okay, so before I get into this, I'd like to say how much do I myself actually believe this day is important. I think it's only relatively important. I'm not expecting myself to notice anything particularly visible in the sense of disasters necessarily. So forget any warnings of massive pessimism from my part. And at the same time, it's also true that many very important things are not necessarily of a visible order. So having these 2 points in mind, why am I studying this if I am not such a great believer, or certainly not a Bible basher type believer, in the importance of this day? Well, why not? I'm studying it for if there is any possible truth in it, and I'm studying it for 2 other reasons. One is that it is a sociological phenomenon which is enormous at this point, and that means something. That means that there's a lot of human energy and psychological, emotional, mental, cognitive attention sent in the direction of this happening event or moment. So in astrology, we're used to realizing, acknowledging that everything is connected. Moments have a quality. They have, you could say, an intrinsic way of being, which is only exists at that moment. And so I'm studying this for this synchronistic importance. Why are so many people and energies activating this day? Something is going on, even if it's all false, but something is. There's a lot of energy, so that's why we're going to study it. And also then for the astrological interest the day has in itself. It is truly a moment that has a good number of things which are out of the ordinary, not everyday happenings. So I think it's worth studying this, although it's definitely the first time I investigate anything relative to doomsday predictions or prophecies for that case. And it may surprise a lot of you, but astrologers, we have so much interesting stuff to do all the time that to get involved with what is almost always just popular bullshit seems like quite a waste of time. But anyway, maybe this occasion is a bit more interesting. So something else I'd like to say before I get into the astrology of the moment is it's also very important, as you're seeing all these websites and entries, that we think who is behind them. And there's a lot of accusations towards new levels of government repression, domination, and many of the individuals and groups who create these videos or types of videos, I believe, in my opinion, just as bad as what they criticize very often. Think of extremely conservative, powerful, and technologically advanced groups all over the world, and yes, particularly in the United States of America. And think of how much that resembles what they're criticizing, and how different spirituality is from that version of religion. Anyway, not to offend anyone, I think religion is important, but I think religion is the baby steps of where we really need to go, which is spiritual understanding or spiritual perspective or integration of the self, however you want to put it. But religion is definitely the basic, the baby steps of all that, and it's very obvious when you start looking through these videos and the types of people who are participating in them. Anyway, so having said this, I'd just like to say there are two or three reasons for which this could all be a whole lot of bollocks or bullshit for that case. One is that it could all just be a big coincidence. Second is that we could all just be projecting, for some reason, imagination or illusion onto this date. And third is that someone could all be just putting it together for a joke. Although I have to admit that there's a bit too much of it for it to be a joke. Some bits of it, however, could easily be very, very absolutely false, and with today's editing capacities, really not difficult at all to create and put out to the public and create a rumor, etc. However, then, which are the reasons for this being important? Well, I'm going to present you with a good number of reasons which are extremely different between each other. And the reason I'm doing this is I think it's important that we realize that life is complex, and some things are simple, other things are complex, and there's many possible reasons for things to happen. So what I'm about to announce is complex, it's contradictory, and it can even seem absurd, but I'm trying to basically make a list of all the moments, all the reasons which you could reasonably argue could explain this phenomenon. Okay, so here's the first. Synchronicity. In astrology, we're very used to understanding that everything is tied together in coherent patterns of time and energy. And some two things can arise at the same time, which are highly related, and yet there is no cause and effect. So in this case, perhaps the energy of the moment contains the type of ideas that we are now pouring into our videos here as human beings on planet Earth. Okay, so that's first reason, synchronicity. Second reason, prophecy or channeling. You may disagree with that this is possible, exists. In my opinion, prophecy does exist, just that there's so much more fake stuff being pumped into our brains from Bible bashers and misunderstood religious experience. And channeling, the same happens. There's many genuine channelings, I believe, but at the same time, so many more are false. Okay, third reason. Now we get into the conspiracy reasons. It seems quite clear that someone is putting a lot of information into the media which is coherent and points at 23rd September 2015 being an important moment. But why? Okay, first reason of the conspiracies. I think that there is such a thing as a self-fulfilling prophecy, and if you feed the public with the idea that a certain moment in time is important, well, you can be helping that prophecy to become true, even if it's through falsehood, but by feeding people's expectations that something will happen that day, well, that's a wonderful way of inducing them into a state of childish belief. Also, one could be playing with the law of attraction in attracting more potential energy to that day for your objectives. That's for people who know a bit about the law of attraction. Another reason is that is a bit more secretive, and is the idea that the best place to hide something is in full daylight. Hide it where it's least expected to be come across or to be found, and this will make people think it's all too easy. So maybe there is something very important behind this day, 23rd of September, and people of the elite, their secret agenda has been to hide it in full daylight where we can all see it, and then suppose that it can't be that, because why would they tell us about it if they were really doing it? Okay, and then there's two more reasons that this could be. It could all be a massive joke, as I said before. In that case, why? And why have they spent so much time and energy in creating this falsehood? And the last possible reason that some conspiracy theorists sometimes employ is that this could be, let's say, helpful, well-intended revelations from part of the elite who are actually, you could say, benign or having the general good at interest. So they would be giving away the evil plan of their counterparts, of their evil counterparts. Okay, so that's what I think all this stuff could be about. That's all quite different. Now let's get into the astrology. Okay, so what we now have here is the chart of the moment, 23rd September 2015, the beginning of the day. This is set for universal time, so the way this will be seen from planet Earth, which is always here in the middle of the chart, is exactly the same. Then there will be different rising signs and houses depending to which part of the globe we're looking at, but we're just going to stick to what is common to the whole planet right now. That way it's a lot easier to deal with. There's something that is non-astrological that I will say to begin with, and it's that you have maybe heard of this Hebrew cycle or time system called the Shemitah. Now, it seems that this system works with a 7-year period, and from the source that I've visited, it does seem to correspond very much with very, very significant moments of history. Now, maybe there's some truth to this, but what I would like to point out is that 7 years is a very important cycle in astrology. This planet here is named Saturn. Saturn takes 28 years to go round the zodiac, and if you divide 28 into 4, well, that's 7-year phases. Those 7-year phases always related to what this so-called Shemitah seems to be about. So anyway, just for those of you who are interested in correlations and developing your understanding a bit further. Okay, now let's get into this chart. What's going on here? Is this important? Is this a chart that seems to be relevant or to stick out somehow from, let's say, the ordinary moment? Well, yes, it is. There is an equinox happening that day, that is that the sun moves into Libra. The sun is going to be conjunct the North Node. I'll tell you all about this. Saturn is at the very beginning of Sagittarius as well, just like the sun is going to be at the very beginning of Libra. So the moment itself carries a very strong reference to starts, beginnings, and we'll see how they point towards a lot of things that we know are happening on this day. Then another thing is that the moon is conjunction Pluto and square to Uranus. And then we have this thing over here that's called an opposition between Jupiter and Neptune. We'll be looking at the cycles of these two planets, which is very interesting with what's happening. And then finally we'll look at how the North Node and something called the South Node that's over here gives a whole level of meaning to this chart, and how we can evolve and maybe make the best of this moment. Okay, so in general I think it's a chart that has a lot of potential, but it is unstable as well. There is potentially a capacity for us to all make, frankly, yes, a great leap forward. There's also the potential for very much the opposite. So it seems like a moment that I dare say is quite polarized. It's easy to be going very far forward and very far backwards at the same time. Probably, well, different people, different subjects will be playing out different roles in all of this. That's what usually happens. Okay, so let's start with the Sun. The Sun is at the very end of Virgo at the beginning of the day, but however, if we go to this wonderful website that's called Planet Watcher, which I recommend very much, and we go to the morning time round about 8:22, well then the Sun moves into the sign of Libra. Okay, this is the beginning of the Equinox. The Sun in Libra, I'll keep this very, very, very basic because there's many interesting things to go into, and this is very basic. But the Sun in Libra is always going to be about a moment of evaluation and seeing things in a different perspective and proactively trying to balance out the different points of views between different people, forces, and trying to do it actively with a sense of justice, balance, harmony, and with a great capacity to enjoy that and make that feel good. When the Sun is conjunction to this factor here called the North Node, there's a great sense of spiritual destiny. The North Node is very much about our sense of mission and what enlarges our experience, what makes our existence feel coherent, and that it's going in a direction which is so clear, solid, and relevant that there's no doubt about who we are, what we're doing, and we feel that being alive is very significant. And anyway, so when the Sun, the life factor, is conjunction the North Node, there's always a great sense of perspective towards a future, in this case a Libran future, a future which is balanced, harmonious, more integrated. What is interesting is that the Sun is this is called a sextile, a harmonious geometrical angle with Saturn, which is also at the beginning of Sagittarius. And Saturn in Sagittarius, Saturn being the discipline, hard-working integration planet, at the beginning of the sign of religion, and at the beginning of which is Sagittarius, and at the beginning of the sign of cultural expansion and greater horizons and metaphysical meaning. Religion and metaphysics and philosophy giving place to the experience of meaning and being coherent and expanded because you are in line with a higher meaning. Well, when Saturn is in this sign, we take that very seriously. It's typically a moment for religious expansion, or establishment. So as you know, on this day, what's happening is one of the things that's happening is the Pope is visiting Obama and the United Nations. Here we see that whether these folks are aware of astrology, and they most definitely are, in any case, even if it was just by synchronicity, they've chosen a moment for this happening which is extremely coherent and definitely makes it easy for any type of objectives which are honest and humanistic and true and spiritually true, if you like, to flourish more easily. Okay, but there's something before all this lot, actually. When the sun moves into Libra, that's the equinox of autumn or fall in the northern hemisphere, but it's a moment which is always going to be extremely tied into when the sun is here, over here, right at the beginning of Aries. That is the beginning of the spring equinox. So it's very interesting that we look at this for a moment, because the spring equinox of this year was followed, this is the chart of that moment, it was followed by a sun eclipse of these, well, this is the sun, and the moon was directly blocking the sunlight at that moment, giving us an eclipse from planet Earth that's here. And only a few hours later we had the sun moving into Aries, which is the beginning of the astrological year. So this year, 2015, has been a very important, relevant year from the beginning, because the sense of initiation of Aries, the sense of the new year that we all experience round about that time of the 20th of March each year, had a very strong sense of connection with Piscean values. So ultra-sensitive, spiritualist, dreamy, but also confused. One of the most positive things this could indicate could be a heightened sense of compassion and sensitivity to any form of suffering in any being. So this year potentially could be very, very strong for an advancement in empathy, sensitivity. At the same time, it could also be very confused. So this is always going, like everything in astrology, is always going to be relative to who is experiencing these energies and these archetypes. So for those of us who are more on a confused side to begin with, the year could potentially be very confused one. Do you remember the suicidal crash over the French Alps? That happened, well, that happened just one day after all this. Obviously that pilot was the pilot who had a lot spoken about, was someone who actually had some very relevant planet. Oh no, he had his own north node here in his chart, I believe. And anyway, he was a perfect example of starting the year in a terribly bad way. But the potential at the same time is enormously humanistic for those of us who can try to use this energy, this sensitivity in an active, constructive way. Okay, so back to the chart in motion here. What else do we have? Let's look at the moon. The moon is in Capricorn most of the day, and it even starts out being in conjunction to Pluto. Well, it's definitely not the, let's say, lightest moment of the cycle. In fact, it's definitely, out of the 28-day lunar cycle, it is most definitely the most tense, emotionally intense, introspective. Moon conjunction Pluto is always very much floating around, heavy feelings. I'm sure I could explain this better. Very much emotionally tuned into and involved with everything which is dark, occult, and typically with the moon being in Capricorn, I think we could say it's a very political moment, a very politically oriented mood that we're going to be in. Politically survivalist, because moon in Capricorn is very much the archetype of not feeling supported or nurtured by life's external conditions or by others, and particularly when it's conjunction Pluto, well, this is much stronger. A few hours later, the moon actually moves into Aquarius. This happens around 1752 GMT. So this is what the chart will look like more or less for the rest of the day. The moon will move into Aquarius, and the mood will be much more social from that moment on, and the moon will actually be in direct trine to the sun and the north node. So at this moment there's probably going to be a certain mood shift towards feeling it's a key word for the moon, in balance and harmonious. That's what this trine gives us, with the sun, with the sense of purpose, with the sense of direction. And the sun very often represents our leaders and politically elected or individuals or kings, or even perhaps a pope in this sense. So, one more factor Saturn, I already told you about, was in a very key meaningful position. But what I think is most relevant is, as for difficult stuff in this chart, is this aspect here, Mars square Saturn. Mars is the action planet, the planet of desire, impulse, the essential masculine drive to just go and get and do what you want. It's the planet of, in the world of the gods, it's the war planet. So anyway, when the planet of impulse, is in tension with the planet of structure, Saturn, limitation, organization, discipline, making things fit in, well then there's a typically uncomfortable moment of feeling a repression of one's Mars, a repression of one's vital energy, an undermining in one's self-confidence to act. And typically there are outbursts of when Mars manages to, let's say, make some space and move away from the Saturn constrainment or from the Saturn inhibition. So it's a moment where there can be certain violent outbursts. I think we could also consider that Mars is at a square aspect with a star, which is over here. I'll tell you very briefly about this star, since it's something I'm very interested in. It's a star which has a name that is Algol. Here is the name spelt out. Algol is a star which is at this degree of Taurus these days. So this means that with the way the astrological geometry works, if there's planets over here, or over here, or over here at this area of Leo, well then Algol is being activated. Algol is a planet which has been activated on some of the most tense and troublesome times. This July and August, Algol has been very, very activated, and we've seen truly horrific scenarios of many types in different places. And well, I've got a number of articles about this on my website that you can visit, in Spanish especially, but some in English. So potentially this moment is quite violent. There is a sense of repression, constrainment, and when Mars has its outburst with a Saturn square, it's typically heavy. It makes a big destruction. So we're speaking about potentially, well, armies, but also ourselves, individuals, or particularly people who have whose charts are more directly activated by these positions. Okay, so what else? There is quite an interesting position for Mercury, the thinking planet, that's right in the middle of Libra and going backwards, what we call retrograde. I won't go into what this is astronomically, but basically Mercury in retrograde in Libra could be a very indecisive moment, and considering that it's in opposition to Uranus, well, a mentally highly charged moment, full of paradoxes, contradictions, and two-way possibilities. I think mentally it's a moment which has a certain level of stress. They also, on the positive, they also might be quite a, you could say, forward-thinking reflection, forward futurist thinking, but of a reflective nature. Okay, so let's get to where I most wanted to take you. Jupiter is in opposition with Neptune, and to make sense of this, it's going to be very interesting that we go back to the time when Jupiter was in conjunction with Neptune. So let's use Planet Watcher up here. We're going to go back to 2009, it was from April 2009 to approximately January of 2010 that Neptune, this guy over here, and Jupiter, this one here, were in conjunction in the sign of Aquarius. Okay, so I'm just going to say Jupiter is typically the planet that relates to religious figures, and Neptune the search of feeling and belonging in unity, the experience of boundless interconnection or oneness, if you like. So whenever these two planets are in conjunction, that's a cycle which is to do with philosophical, metaphysical understanding, a sense of compassion and ideals, and dreamy, mystical, utopian hopes which inspire us, and hopefully we can manage to put into our lives to some extent. The other side of the coin is self-delusion, religious delusion, religious pomposity and extravagance, and from the sign of Aquarius, well, we could say that it's even more potentially, as you know, Aquarius is related to the sense of future and alternatives, but also experiments which are just not a good idea. So, added to this, back in those times when this cycle was starting, that has now reached its peak, these two planets, Jupiter and Neptune, were in tension with guess who? Yes, the star, Algol, over here in Taurus. So, if you put all this together, Jupiter, Neptune, Algol, which is, you could say, an archetype of the forces of destruction, hatred, everything which is darkest and most hateful and potentially violent in us, in you, me, and all of us. We're all human, we're all animals. Even the Bible bashers. Whenever we're closest to, whenever this is activated, it is truly when we see on planet Earth the most hideous facet of our potential. Aquarius is very much related to science and investigation, future technology. So, guess what was happening round about when this cycle was started? I'm going to tell you a number of things, and you tell me if they do fit in or if they don't. One of the things that started was, well, there was an outbreak of swine flu sometime before, and at this moment it was deemed a global pandemic. Since Neptune is very much about the interconnection beyond any type of containment, and Jupiter is about expansion, any pandemic is very much ruled by Jupiter-Neptune cycles, and this is true in history. Also, Bolivia, in South America, Bolivia declared the right for its indigenous people to govern themselves. Well, For my values, that's beautiful and wonderful and necessary. That's a very humanistic approach, well, manifestation of these energies. And at the same time, how interesting is this? The film Avatar, James Cameron's film Avatar, was released. This is all in the same time span of the cycle starting. And Neptune is very much related to sea, water, everything which is about water. And how interesting is it that on November 13th of 2009, NASA announced that there was a significant quantity of water in a crater on the moon, and that in December 16, astronomers discovered the first known exoplanet on which water could exist. This might seem absurd to those of you who know nothing about astrology, but the thing is, astrology is about information in time, and it's about synchronicity as well, so it is related that we discover the possibility of water on other places which are distant and apparently disconnected from us. And that's what Aquarius is about, things which are distant and apparently disconnected, but related. Okay, so what else? You're going to like this one. What else? The Cern in Switzerland, the Cern, that has been spoken about so much, restarted on November 20th of 2009. That is when CERN restarted the Large Hadron Collider Particle Accelerator. Now, coincidence? Well, no. This is just the way astrology works. This is just the way life works. But most people sadly know nothing about astrology yet. So, I'd like to add Jupiter and Neptune is also very much related to the figure, the archetype of the prophet, but also of the fake, also of the false prophet. So right now, going back to the present, I'll just do that. That will take us back to the present, and I'll go to the day we're talking about. Going back to the present, right now this means that we're at the peak of this cycle. Jupiter and Neptune, they've moved on through the zodiac, yes, but they are still part of the cycle, and this is the peak. This is like the full moon of the lunar cycle. So what can I tell you about this? Now is a moment in which we're going to see the results of what was started back then. So if we're observant, we're going to be looking into what was active then and is active now, and see how it goes. I'm going to tell you a tiny bit about Jupiter. Jupiter is the planet of expansion, the ideals that inspire us and give a sense of purpose to what we do, who we are. It's the planet that is related to Sagittarius. And Jupiter rules religious figures. Jupiter right now is in Virgo, the sign of one of the signs most related to science and analysis. So, and definitely small things, as you probably know about. So, when the planet of the religious figures is in the sign of science, it's not surprising that we have all these television preachers in the States suddenly talking about science as if it was something they knew about in any way. And it's also no surprise that Virgo, which rules scientists, having the planet of expansion in it at the moment, has the CERN activity now that is in theory they're going to invest double the amount of energy into the machines to take the experiments a step further. Now, remember the chart of when the cycle started. It was in tension with Algol over here, remember? Well, moments when Neptune, Jupiter are related to Algol can typically be moments of some type of disaster, but with Neptune, this one's Neptune. Things are usually quite occult, subtle. I'll give you an example. Neptune was very prominent in the chart of the biggest recent nuclear disaster in Japan, when the earthquake started this now ongoing nuclear problem, which is menacing with contaminating a very, very big area. That's how Neptune works. Neptune is very much about the subtle interrelated connections. So is there some level of reasonable fear in what people are playing with at the Cern? Well, the archetypes are there. I think so, yes. For me, the answer is yes. Do they know what they're doing? Maybe not. There's no reason for me to say that this is a definitely implies disaster. There are reasons for me to say that it would make sense, that it would be coherent with the typical patterns. Okay, so let's move on to the very end of this. We're going to speak very briefly about the nodes. As I mentioned, the so-called nodes, are about the evolutionary sense of direction. Well, the North Node, the one that brings us the sense of where we want to go, not where we want to go, but how we are going to be expanded, is in Libra, and the South Node is over here. It's not, the symbol does not appear with this program, but it's over here, right at the other side, which is degree 1 of Aries. Okay. So that represents that the sense of belonging, of origin, of where we're coming from, is very much related to Aries, the war sign, the sign of starting things, the sign of impulse, the sign of immediate action. So you've probably noticed all the time that the North Node has been coming through Libra, and the South Node has been coming through Aries. There's been a very big tendency to either be going in a very Libran direction of evolution, which is towards harmony, or somehow returning and hovering around and staying in the mud fighting mentality. So at this moment, it's quite possible that the negative potential is big, the potential of destructiveness, of things going wrong, things going too quick, because the planet of Aries, Mars, is over here. And remember what I told you about Mars square Saturn? Mars is not in its easiest position at the moment. It's also square Algol. So those of us who are, by our lack of awareness or lack of consciousness, however you want to put it, let's say going backwards, South Node, we might be doing it in a very heavy, noticeable way, quite a destructive way. How about those of us who manage to keep looking forward, seeing the light at the end of the tunnel? Well, Sun conjunction North Node, well, that is one hell of a nice moment, yeah. A very constructive sense of peacemaking and very convinced about it. But here's where you're going to like it even better. Remember which planet rules Libra? Well, it's Venus, and Venus is over here in Leo. And that is definitely a warm type of moment. Venus is the love planet, and also it's how we like to give and receive affection. I'm going to give you a very easy example that will help you understand this position. Venus in Leo, trine, this is called a trine, to Uranus. These two planets were in exactly the same signs, in the same exact trine from 19 degrees of Aries to 19 degrees of Leo. Well, they were in different degrees, but when gay marriage was legalized in the States, and this gave place to this massive world happiness and sense of liberation and joy and mutual respect, and whether you are gay or you're not, well, just being happy for the sense of liberation and enjoyment, and Venus is the affection planet, Uranus is the unconventional, the forward-thinking, or also the archetype of experimentation, or it's a very genderless energy. It's not male or female. So it sort of made a lot of sense that gay marriage was legalized at that moment. Okay, so we've got a lot of that same type of very forward, open-hearted, if you like, open-hearted interrelatedness going on. So I think it's a great moment for a sense of more social integration. The only thing is, we have to be cautious of not being overly idealistic with the Jupiter-Neptune principle, which can represent massive delusions to ourselves or to others, putting utopia or the sense of interconnectedness far beyond what is actually possible at this stage. So it's massive, expansive dreaminess, but it can also be a massive awakening of a sense of compassion, and we must act. And how must we act? Well, in very specific, helpful ways, because Jupiter's in Virgo. Okay, so I hope that wasn't too much for those of you who are totally new, and I hope you see the opportunity to learn a bit about astrology, the way it works, and we're not only talking about the 23rd of September, we're talking about the immediate environment of all these days as well. I will be making a video very soon about Jupiter in Virgo, and I will be making another one very soon as well about Saturn in Sagittarius. So please come back to my channel. You can also visit my website, which is at the beginning of this video. I'll show it to you again. And just to end, I could say, let's see who plays out each of these parts that I've been speaking about. It's up to us. I don't know who and how they will be manifested yet, and all the very best to all of us, and let's hope we can put it in the evolutionary direction.